Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Experience Kills. I'm your host Ben. With me today, my amazing co-host is Richard.
I love you. You're pretty good too.
I love you too. That's sweet, isn't it? So, I don't know, there's like a bit of a horror thing going on right now on the channel, and we're continuing that with a game that's been out for a little over a month or so on the consoles, and I've had a chance to check it out now. It's been out on PC for a little bit longer than that, end of last year, and that's Moons of Madness by Funcom. And very simply put, Moods of Madness is basically like a walking sim. So think Gone Home, think, Dear Esther, those sorts of games.
Well, I was thinking more like Soma. This looks like Soma.
No, because with Soma, you have that threat, don't you? The constant monster chasing thing. Is that right?
Not always, but yeah, sort of.
Kind of more like Outlast almost and stuff like those kind of games.
Yeah.
But this has some of that, but it's definitely a heavier focus on the tone, the setting, the story and characters, and the kind of just sense of dread that comes from that. You're not always being chased by monsters. There is some elements of like avoiding monstery stuff, but it's kind of minimal compared to what is actually just more of an exploration situation, and also some really well done contextual puzzles as well. So basically in Moods of Madness you play, it's never a good name choice for a character, but you play Shane, who is on a secret sort of mission to Mars. So there's a bit of a Martian vibe to this as well.
I like to imagine it is Shane from Neighbours.
If you like, but I don't know if that's going to help you. I mean, honestly, it's a bad name, but it's just not a good name for any protagonist or antagonist in anything ever. But don't worry too much about that. You get, it's actually really well done. Everything it's fully voiced, so there's a lot of conversation that happens as you're playing this game between Shane and the other members of the team across the radio.
Mrs. Mangle.
Sorry?
Mrs. Mangle.
Oh, shut up, you dick. Stop derailing my review here of Moon of Madness. This is a scary, atmospheric, intense game. It isn't bloody Neighbours, you nutter. But, wow, I've not thought of that in such a long time. It's frightening. But anyway, so there's a good bit of, like, character dialogue there as well. It could have been that element was basically forgotten and you would have been very much alone in this situation, but you actually feel like you're part of this team, even if if you're not usually in the same room with them and you're usually just talking over the radio. But it's actually handled really, really well. They could have gone in Moons of Madness for some really obvious, over-the-top kind of Cthulhu stuff, but they actually do a really good sort of job of interpreting and being inspired by Lovecraft mythos, but then kind of making their own thing out of it a bit and sort of setting itself apart. It's actually, weirdly, I didn't realise this until doing some research, but Moons of Madness by Funcom is actually kind of a spin-off game from the Secret World MMO that they developed many years ago on PC, so it's sort of tangentially connected to that. Now, I never played that game, but what I can imagine is that we've got, giant mega corporations that have sent this mission and things like that, and, there's also a connection to the lore and the mythos, and I bet you there's lots of stuff in there that if you are aware of that game and played that game, you'd be like, oh yeah, it's those guys, oh, it's that thing, and there's lots of little references, which, to be honest, as someone who hadn't played that game, made no difference to me in enjoying this. I still was able to get in there and pick up on everything and understand what was going on, but I bet you there'd just be a little extra layer if you'd come from playing their previous games, that Funcom. I think that's really cool, actually, that they're doing this, and it still works as a standalone. So let's quickly talk about the main gameplay. Like I said, it's exploration, you're walking around, you're interacting with stuff in front of you. It actually plays and controls really well. You feel like a guy in a spacesuit, and it does stuff to really emphasize the hostile nature of the planet Mars, because when you're going outside, you have to go through this same kind of process every time when you leave and re-enter the base, for example, where you put your helmet on, you top up your oxygen, you cycle the airlock, you open the door, you leave. So when you come back, you have to do the opposite, and you have to kind of learn to do a bit of like, Martianing, as it were, which makes you really feel connected to that environment and to that place. I thought that was really smart. You don't just like enter the airlock and leave, immediately. You actually have to go through a fairly simple, but at the same time important process that you wouldn't be able to leave the base without doing. And again, you think when you look at some of these videos, maybe that there's going to be quite a sort of singular design vision, that you're going to spend a lot of time in grey halls and you're just going to see a lot of the base, and then there's a bit of the red desert. But I don't want to spoil anything because this game is all about the story and the narrative, but yeah, they do a really good job of keeping those environments fresh. There are some really cool twists and revelations in this game, and I was properly impressed with where they took the story, the characters. It's so hard because it's a story-based game. I don't want to spoil anything, but honestly, they do a really good job here, and they bring in those kind of Elder Gods elements, the unknowable, ginormous, incomprehensible entities of evil, or not evil, just complete disregard for anything to do with humanity. Usually is how they come out here. But then you've got corporations and secrets, and man's inhumanity to man, and there's lots of like really cool elements that come into play here. There's stuff to do with Shane's backstory, his history, his parentage, all the way through to having this really authentic feeling sci-fi setting. And Shane's job on this base is he's basically the handyman, so you spend a lot of the early part of the game doing kind of grunt work. You kind of going places to try and fix stuff. There's some problems, and then as that sort of mundanity comes up against the weirdness of the situation as it slowly unfolds, you find yourself getting into these more and more critical, important situations that lead to this overall plot, and it's really well done. I was proper impressed with it. Like that kind of, you feel like a space engineer, but it's not, you're having to do really difficult stuff. It's much more like the puzzles involved with that have been designed in a way that a gamer understands it, and it's not horribly difficult, but at the same time it connects you enough to the reality of the situation, which really puts you in Shane's shoes. Though it's still a shame he's called Shane.
Shane. No, that does sound awesome, and it sounds totally up my street. I like that they've grounded it in sort of an everyman scenario, even though it's on the moon and in space.
It's on Mars. It's on Mars.
Oh, it's Mars, is it?
Yeah, it's not the moon, it's Mars. The moon bit comes from, I think it's Deimos and Phobos, the moons around Mars.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's there's a whole load of shit to do with them, and I don't want to spoil any of that. But yeah, you're on Mars. Yeah, so the moons of Mars. Yeah.
Okay. So you said there's other people involved, but is it predominantly a solitary experience?
Yes, and generally when you meet the other people, it's never in a good situation.
Okay.
Yeah. There's some great reveals in this, some truly creepy, horrible, skin-crawly imagery. It does do the odd jump scare, and I mentioned that there's the odd situation of monsters or creatures or something, chasing you, or apparition-y type things. That sort of stuff does happen, and obviously the hint is in the title, Madness, Moons of Madness. There are elements of, insanity, and can you trust what you are seeing and what you are experiencing, and I think that's really kind of cool what they do with that as well. And yeah, there was one jump scare that happened that I had my headphones on playing, and it made me jump as the wife was coming into the living room, which made her jump, but her reaction then kind of reinforced my own fear, and I kind of like got more scared out of it. I was like, why are you jumping? She didn't even see the screen, but she jumped because I jumped. So it was kind of like, I went, oh fuck, and she went, oh what? And I was like, what's happening? And it was really good. It's not like the kind of scary where you're not getting like jump scare. They pace them really well. They're usually actually quite unpredictable, because you'll go through long segments of these games where you're doing quite mundane tasks, and you're just doing exploring, and you're not really being threatened. But then something will happen and they'll change it up, and it always keeps you guessing. And like I said, they do some stuff here with backtracking, going back to the base, but the base changing in interesting ways, which keeps it fresh and keeps the puzzles interesting. And yeah, there's some really good puzzle mechanics in here, like really cool interactive elements that do feel like they work and make sense in the place you're in. But they're always keeping them fresh and keeping them changed. I'm really, really impressed by this game.
It totally sounds like my thing. It sounds confusing though, because looking at the trailer, that really makes it look like this high energy, jump scare, constant action, constant chase sort of feel, like Soma, or other types of horror games that just really put the player under massive stress all the time. It's got a soundtrack that sort of bears that out in the trailer as well. It's just massively tense and scary, but from what you were saying, that's more punctuated through the experience, and some of it's more slow paced.
Absolutely, yeah, no, 100%. And it encourages you to do things like spend a lot of time reading There's loads of documents in the environment, which again lent it much more to the walking sim style game. So you're picking up pieces of paper and notes and stuff and reading lore, and then you're doing a lot of time sitting at computers and reading emails, for example, as well. Just to, obviously you don't have to do all of these things, but you're going to want to, because it all adds to the experience and to the lore and gives you that context for what's going on around you. And there's loads of that. It's almost Gone Home levels of interactivity at times, where you can go into a room and there's just loads of things to pick up, and you can turn them over and there might be something on the back, and you'll find key codes and passcodes and contextual passwords written on things. It's got that really high quality texture where if there's something written on the wall or a picture on the wall, you can look at it and see it and read it and understand it. Cool. If you pick up a document, you can hit read and it'll turn it into basic text, or you can just zoom in on the right trigger and read it. Like the textures are high quality enough that you can do that. I've got to mention it because it did stand out. There was one weirdly low-res texture, and it must have just been a compromise where food on plates looks terrible. Like, I got into one habitat where like a guy was living like a slob, and there were all these plates with what looked like JPEG pictures of like what would be like generic green food on it. And it was just like, why does this have no depth to it? This looks so weird. Everything else looks amazing and is really fully modeled, but that looks like crap. So they must have just had to like, we don't have the resources to model all of that, sadly, so we just having to cut that out. But no, so there's a sprint in this game, but it's not a sprint, it's like a slow jog. That gives you a good idea that this is a walking sim, and it's all about that tension. There's like I mentioned, on the right trigger you can zoom in and stuff, and that actually weirdly becomes another type of gameplay mechanic later on, but I can't tell you about that because it's all about story beats and narrative. I'm going to be interesting how I cut this video together, because I really don't want to give anything away, but there's so much that just happens to the environments and to your character and to the whole kind of concept of what this game is, because it does a great job of it in a one-to-one setting, revealing itself to the player and the character, so you really feel that you're in Shane's shoes. And it does it's really well done, the first person in this game, that you've got the HUD elements when you're wearing a helmet, you've got this like arm based menu interface on your arm, but it's also like a scanning device that has other uses as well later as the game comes on and develops and things happen, and everything really just does a really good job of putting you like you're on Mars. You really do feel quite isolated and at risk and afraid and alone, even though you're talking to your teammates. You never really like catch up with them, and therefore you just feel like everything's against you, and you're just this blue collar dude that just wants to get home. Like, you feel really stressed and put upon, but there's a great sense of exploration, and I love it. I love the Mars setting, and I love the combination with that kind of Lovecraftian mythos. It works brilliantly well, like really, really cool. Kind of surprised not more people were talking about this game, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm surprised it passed me by, because it sounds perfect for me. I love this sort of game, and I particularly love games that have a sci-fi setting like this. So I think before we'd even started talking about it, I was sold on it by watching the trailer. But yeah, you're right, I don't understand why there hasn't been more noise about it if it's as good as you're telling me it is, and certainly it's going to go on my list as one to watch.
Fantastic, mate. So I think that brings us to the end of our discussion of Moons of Madness. This has been another episode of Experience Kills. I really hope you've enjoyed listening or watching to this, depending on if you're on YouTube. If you are on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe. If you're listening on a podcast, please go to YouTube to give us a like and subscribe, or review us and rate us on iTunes or Spotify or wherever that might be. You can find us at Experience Kills on Twitter. You can find me at DIYE. You can find Richard at Colonel Red. Yeah, that's basically everything. Like, you give us a like and subscribe, and we can just keep producing these fun videos for you guys. And welcome to all the new subscribers we've had recently as well. And we'll be back very soon with some more Experience Kills. So until then, get your ass to Mars, Richard.
2 weeks.